Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's episode of Canal Days. As always, I am your host Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise of the local history as our personal guide. Each episode we uncover history throughout local communities, highlighting historic landmarks and remaining relics, while uncovering their seminal significance. Today's episode of Canal Days, we'll be learning about the churches throughout Easthampton. And we'll be discussing the various religious affiliations of their churches. And let's begin today's episode. So, inform us of the Catholic churches of Easthampton.
The Catholics came in for the mill jobs, of course, like they always do, and there were a lot of them. So you needed a church that was somewhat close to all the worker homes, and the Immaculate Conception Church campus started on Adams Street. It started in the year 1868 with a wooden church, and that was very quickly outgrown. Now, for each of these churches I discussed, there's a separate video, a separate text page, so I won't go into great depth on all these subjects, just a general view. But that was taken down, a new one put up, burned down next year, but in 1884, finally you had one go up, and that's the one that's up in position now. Now called Our Lady of the Valley, because it's joined a merger of all three of the Catholic churches. The French Canadian came in also. They wanted their own French language masses, and they opened up the Notre Dame de Bon Consul Church, I believe 1906. And then the Polish came in. They would be at Immaculate Conception until they got their own church, the Sacred Heart Church, 1909. All three churches are still there. And their school systems are still around. Sometimes their commons are around, their rectories. Some of what I'm saying is much more complex, like the history of Notre Dame de Bon Consul church is much more complex because it really started on Union Street and then moved over to Pleasant Street. So it's a very complex history, but the whole is that mill workers were the Catholics, and it started later the Protestants, but it blossomed very quickly from there.
And describe the congregational churches throughout Easthampton.
Now, the Congregational Church would be the meeting house churches. The church you have to start up if you want a town and broken off for another city, then you would have to get your own meeting houses, among other things. So, the very first church inside of every town in Massachusetts is a Congregationalist church. Now, the one from Easthampton probably wasn't made until 1835 when they put their own physical church up. They probably had to use the rector's house, the minister's house, or other people's houses from 1785 onwards, unless there was a predecessor church. And then in 1835, I think they finally built neoclassical style church for themselves right off the green of Easthampton, the nowadays Pulaski Park. That church is now gone, but it's called the First Church. The rector's house was built much later, I believe in the 1840s, and that lasted a long time. But those churches are gone and replaced with the Payson Congregational Church, in a very obvious location, named after Payson Williston, the first congregational minister of Easthampton. His son, Samuel Williston, would start up mills in the Stockport Academy. So, to say the least, the Williston family is probably beyond doubt the most important family in Easthampton. And nowadays, even that Payson Congregational Church is not the name of it anymore. People historically call it that. It's now being called the First Congregational Church, and that's because it joined with the First Church, which still existed, and that joining of the Payson and the first church became the first Congregational Church of Easthampton.
And stick around and we'll be right back after this quick announcement. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, founded by Robert Camus. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families and groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214 @yahoo.com to book your private tour today. So getting back to our podcast, an episode on the Church of Easthampton. What about the Protestant churches?
There's a lot of Protestant churches. All these denominations wanted their own church structure. One of really old one is still there is a Providence Methodist Church, which has a long involved history also, including that to make it they had to move old Center Cemetery from the location. But that church is still there. It's a daycare center now with a chapel towards the back. And so read about more of that when you can. The Lutherans also were in the city of Easthampton, the Trinity Lutheran Church and the Christ Evangelical Lutheran Church, the last one at the Mount Station village of Easthampton. There's a Calvary Baptist church nowadays. There also is a Methodist Episcopal Church. That one, they tell me, used to be near the town hall, so I wonder where it was. But still around is the St. Philip's Episcopal Church. In the 1880s, it was built on Union Street, but by 1902, they were at a new location at 128 Main Street, and they're still there. And so that one, you can visit. The minister's house is right next to it. And so you got a lot of churches still around Easthampton. You still have very old ones. The Catholic ones are still around. A lot of the old Protestant ones are there, and you got the mix of the modern ones come in. Even on the campus of Williston Academy, you have their own chapel. So religion is still important, and in fact, when you drive through the center of town, what do you see? You see the Payson Congregational Church still.
And are there any synagogues for those of Jewish faith within the town?
The Jewish people of Easthampton would have had to go to synagogue in Northampton, and there is no other closer one besides Holyoke and Springfield after that, so they probably traveled up to Northampton. Most Jewish people did not come to this area until the late 1890s, and so that's when the synagogues really blossomed around the area. But by far, the Northampton one would have been the one. There's never been one in Easthampton, but the school and the cemetery would have been in Northampton too. Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening to our podcast on the Churches of Easthampton Canal Days series, and joining us on our journey through the Connecticut River Valley's rich history. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden, overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Camus, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org.